I signed for money. I stayed for love. I left for justice. Millionaire paid her to be his wife, but her goodbye cost him everything. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please take a moment to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. And tell me in the comments where you are watching from: New York, Dallas, or maybe somewhere quiet tonight. Now, let us return to our main character. Rain streaked down the windows of a dim cafe in downtown Chicago. The clock above the counter ticked towards 7 as Ava Reed pressed her trembling hands around a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. She was 26, drowning in medical bills from her mother's surgery, and one eviction notice away from losing everything. The cafe was nearly empty except for one man sitting in the corner, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit, a silver watch glinting under the warm light. When Ethan Cole lifted his eyes from the tablet in front of him, she felt the air tighten. Everyone in the city knew his name: tech magnate, venture capitalist, the kind of man who could buy and sell entire companies before breakfast. She just never expected to meet him this way. He stood as she approached, motioning to the chair across from him. "Miss Reed," he said evenly, his voice low but commanding. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Ava forced a nervous smile. "Your assistant said you wanted to discuss an opportunity." Ethan slid a sleek leather folder across the table. Inside lay a document stamped with his company's seal and a diamond ring resting on top. "I am offering you a contract," he said. "A marriage contract. 90 days. No intimacy. No interference in each other's private lives. You will attend a few public events with me, and in return every debt you owe will disappear." The sound of rain deepened. Ava's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. "You are not serious," she whispered. "I am," Ethan replied. "My board insists on a stable image before the next merger. You fit the profile: educated, articulate, morally clean. You need financial security. I need a wife in the headlines. It is business, nothing more." Her fingers brushed the ring. It was heavier than she expected, cold against her skin. "And when the 90 days are over?" He met her gaze without blinking. "We sign the dissolution papers, and you walk away with enough money to start over." Ava swallowed the lump in her throat. The idea was insane, but so was the thought of losing her mother's treatment or ending up on the street. She looked at him, the man who could erase all her problems with a signature, and wondered if the price of survival was her dignity. Finally, she exhaled. "If I agree, there have to be rules." Ethan leaned back slightly, interest flickering in his eyes. "Then set them. No affection in public unless required," she said, steadying her voice. "No pretending when it is just us, and if either of us starts to feel something real, we end it, immediately." For the first time, a faint smile curved his lips. "Clause 13, he murmured, adding it to the document with a stroke of his pen. "No falling in love." When she signed her name beside his, lightning flashed outside, illuminating their faces in the window's reflection, two strangers bound by ink, money, and silence. Neither of them knew that Clause 13 would be the first one they would both break. The following morning, the rain had stopped, but the city still looked washed in silver. Ava Reed stood in front of a mirror inside a quiet bridal boutique, staring at her reflection. The white dress fit perfectly, elegant but simple, chosen by Ethan Cole's assistant. Everything about it felt unreal: the delicate lace, the faint scent of new fabric, the contract folded inside her purse. 90 days. She whispered it under her breath like a spell she did not believe in. Across town, Ethan adjusted the cufflinks on his tailored suit. The man in the mirror looked composed, but there was a flicker of something else behind his eyes: doubt, or maybe curiosity. He had handled billion-dollar deals with less hesitation than this. Yet when he pictured the woman sitting nervously across from him last night, signing her name with shaking hands, something inside him shifted. They met again at the small courthouse downtown. No flowers, no music, no guests. Just two witnesses, a judge, and the sound of pen-scratching paper. When the ceremony ended, the judge smiled politely. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Cole." The words landed like a whisper. Neither of them was ready to claim. Outside, the drizzle returned, fine as mist. Ethan held an umbrella over her as they walked to his black sedan. Ava's voice was quiet. "So, that is it?" He nodded. "That is it." A pause hung between them before she added, "It feels strange." Ethan's tone softened. "It is supposed to." The car wound through the city until it reached the Cole estate, a modern glass mansion overlooking Lake Michigan. Ava stepped out, her heels clicking against the marble driveway, eyes wide at the sheer scale of it. Inside, everything gleamed: polished oak, art-lined corridors, soft light spilling from chandeliers. A housekeeper greeted them with a bow. "This is not a home," Ava murmured, almost to herself. "It feels like a museum." Ethan glanced at her, the corner of his mouth tightening. "It serves its purpose." He led her to a guest room, spacious, spotless, distant. "You will stay here. Breakfast is at 8, dinner at 7. If anyone asks, we have been married for 6 months." Ava nodded, clutching her small bag like armor. "And if someone asks how we met?" Ethan's gaze lingered on her for a beat. "Tell them the truth that it was business." That night, the mansion was silent, except for the hum of rain against the tall windows. Ava sat, on the edge of her bed, scrolling through photos of her mother in the hospital. Her chest tightened. This contract had bought time, but it had also taken something she could not name. She set the phone down and looked at the ring on her finger. Its sparkle felt heavy. Down the hall, Ethan sat in his study, the same silence pressing on him. He opened the folder from his assistant public schedule: press questions, gala invitations. Everything was neat, predictable. But his mind replayed her face at the courthouse, the way she hesitated before saying, "I do." There was no greed in her eyes, only quiet desperation. Later that week, Ava's new routine began. A stylist came each morning, teaching her posture, etiquette, how to smile for cameras. Ethan's world demanded polish, and she did her best to adapt. At their first charity gala, her hands trembled when she stepped out of the car into the blaze of flashbulbs. Ethan offered his arm, steady and calm. "Remember Clause 13, he whispered, almost teasing. "No falling in love." She forced a breath, matching his stride, the image of perfection. Inside, reporters whispered, cameras clicked, and for a moment, she forgot the weight of the deal. They danced once for the cameras, his hand hovering politely at her waist. When the music slowed, Ethan looked down at her and said quietly, "You are doing well, Ava." "Thank you," she replied, meeting his eyes. "Just business, right?" He hesitated a fraction too long before answering, "Of course." Outside, snow began to fall over the lake, silent and soft like a secret neither of them wanted to name. By the third week, Ava Reed had learned how to move through Ethan Cole's world without drawing attention. She knew when to smile, when to stay quiet, and how to let the cameras capture what they wanted, a picture-perfect marriage built on paper and silence. Yet behind every flash of the paparazzi, she could feel the edges of her real life slipping away. Her mother's condition had stabilized, the hospital bills paid in full. On paper, she was safe. In her heart, she was not. One cold evening, the mansion buzzed with preparations for a corporate dinner. Ethan's board members were coming, and appearances mattered. Ava stood before the mirror as the stylist pinned her hair into an elegant twist. The gown shimmered silver under the light, but her expression was distant. When Ethan appeared at the doorway, dressed in a black tuxedo, even the air seemed to shift. "You look," he began, stopping himself before the word beautiful could escape. "Presentable." She smiled faintly. "That is high praise, coming from you." The dinner began with clinking glasses and small talk heavy with money and ambition. Ava stayed close to Ethan, speaking only when prompted. When a shareholder made a sharp remark about her modest background, she did not flinch. Instead, she lifted her glass and said calmly, "We all start somewhere, do we not?" The room fell quiet for a second. Then, Ethan chuckled, breaking the tension. "Indeed, we do." After the guests left, the house grew quiet again. Ethan found her on the balcony, arms crossed against the cold. "You handled yourself well," he said softly. "They can be unforgiving." She turned toward him, her hair fluttering in the wind. "So can you." For a moment, their eyes met. There was something unspoken in that silence, mutual recognition, maybe respect. Ethan started to say something but stopped. "Good night, Mrs. Cole." "Good night, Mr. Cole," she replied, though her heart whispered otherwise. Days turned into a routine neither of them could explain. They shared coffee in the mornings, brief smiles across the breakfast table, occasional laughter during drives to public events. Clause 13 hung between them like invisible glass. No falling in love. But it was already cracking. One rainy afternoon, Ava wandered into Ethan's study while he was on a call. The shelves were lined with awards, but a small framed photograph on the desk caught her eye, a young boy and a woman smiling in front of an old cabin. Ethan noticed her gaze when he hung up. "My mother and brother," he said quietly. "She passed when I was 17. He chose a different path." Ava studied him. "You never talk about them. There is not much to say," he replied, then added, "People leave. Work does not." Her voice softened. "Maybe that is why you built so much, so you would never have to lose anything again." The words landed deeper than she realized. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he did not argue. Instead, he looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing the person beneath the contract. That night, the storm outside grew fierce. A power outage darkened the mansion. Ava found herself standing at Ethan's study door with a flashlight. "I figured the great Ethan Cole might not have candles," she said. He laughed quietly for the first time. "You figured right." They sat near the fireplace, its weak glow painting their faces in amber light. For the first time, they spoke freely about her art dreams, about his fear of trust, about the emptiness money could not fill. As the rain softened, Ava noticed his hand resting near hers on the couch. Close, but not touching. A part of her wanted to move closer, to see if warmth felt the same when it was real. But she pulled back instead. When the lights flickered back on, she rose quickly. "Good night, Ethan." He nodded, though his eyes lingered on her long after she left. Alone, he stared into the dying fire and whispered the words she could not hear. Clause 13 was a mistake. The following week, the Cole mansion buzzed again with preparations, this time for the annual charity gala, the event that defined Ethan Cole's spotless reputation. For Ava, it marked the halfway point of their contract. 45 days down, 45 to go. She told herself that was all it was, halfway through a business arrangement, but her heart no longer believed the math. As she stood before the mirror, slipping on a dark blue gown that shimmered like midnight, she caught her reflection and barely recognized herself. The waitress from Chicago was gone. In her place stood someone poised, graceful, and heartbreakingly distant. Ethan appeared at the door, his tie undone, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "You should be careful," Ava said with a teasing glance. "Clause 13 might start to tremble." He handed her a glass, his smile faint. "If it breaks, we both pay the price." The gala began under crystal chandeliers, the ballroom glowing with gold light and polished laughter. Cameras flashed as Ethan led Ava through the crowd, their every move a headline waiting to happen. When reporters called her name, she smiled naturally now, no longer pretending. Ethan's hand rested lightly on her back, a gesture small enough to ignore, but it sent a current through her that no contract could control. During dinner, an older board member raised a glass. "To Mr. Cole," he said loudly, "and to the woman who tamed him." The room laughed. Ethan's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Ava lifted her glass. "I do not think anyone can tame a storm," she said with a soft smile. "You just learn to dance in the rain." The laughter turned into applause. Ethan's expression softened, pride flickering in his eyes. After the speeches, music filled the air. Ethan offered his hand. "One dance, Mrs. Cole." She hesitated only a moment before taking it. The orchestra swelled, and the world blurred around them. They moved in rhythm, slow and deliberate, his breath close enough for her to feel. For the first time, silence between them felt full instead of empty. When the music ended, he leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you ever wish it were real?" Ava's smile faltered. "Do not ask questions you already know the answer to." He nodded slowly, eyes unreadable. "Then I will not." Later that night, back at the mansion, the echoes of the gala still lingered in the halls. Ava stood on the terrace overlooking the city lights, the wind cool against her skin. Ethan joined her quietly, holding 2 mugs of tea. "You were extraordinary tonight," he said. "So were you," she replied. "You almost looked human," he chuckled softly. "Almost." For a moment they watched the skyline in silence. Then Ava turned to him. "What happens after this, Ethan? When the contract ends?" His answer came after a long pause. "We sign the dissolution papers. You go back to your life. I continue mine. That simple?" He looked at her, the flicker of pain almost invisible. "Nothing is ever simple, Ava." The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall windows, but the air between them felt heavier. Ava busied herself with routine emails from the foundation, new charity proposals, the facade of normalcy. Yet the image of him at the gala, his hand resting gently on hers, would not leave her mind. That evening, as she returned from a meeting, she found Ethan in the garden, sleeves rolled up, fixing a broken lantern. It was the first time she had seen him without his armor of perfection. "You can afford a dozen people to do that," she said lightly. "I wanted to do it myself," he replied. "Some things mean more when you fix them with your own hands." Their eyes met, and something in her chest trembled. For a long moment, they stood in silence under the fading sky. Then Ethan said quietly, "If this were not a contract, would you have said yes?" Ava's voice caught in her throat. "You should not ask that, but I already did." She turned away, hiding the tear that escaped before she could stop it. "Then I will not answer." Behind her, the lantern flickered back to life, casting a soft, unsteady light over both of them like a promise neither dared to speak. A week later, the cracks began to show. The rumor had started quietly, an anonymous post on a finance blog suggesting Ethan Cole's marriage was nothing more than a strategic publicity move. Within hours, headlines spread across every business site. Fake marriage? Cole Industries under fire. Paparazzi camped outside the mansion gates. Reporters shouted questions whenever Ava left the car, and investors demanded answers. Inside the boardroom, tension burned like electricity. Ethan sat at the head of the long glass table, his executives restless around him. "We can manage this," one said. "Just issue a statement denying everything." Ethan's voice was calm but cold. "A lie will not fix another lie." His eyes met Ava's across the room. She had insisted on standing beside him even when he told her to stay home. Her chin lifted slightly, her gaze steady. When the meeting ended, she followed him into the corridor. "They are blaming me," she said quietly. "They think I leaked it." "I know you did not," he replied. "But the press will not care. They want a story, not the truth." She folded her arms, frustration in her voice. "Then give them one. Tell them the truth that it was a contract, that you only married me for the company's image. End it before it destroys everything you have built." Ethan's eyes darkened. "And what about you? When they find out you were paid, what will that do to your mother, to your life?" Ava looked away. Maybe the truth is still better than pretending. That night, she sat alone in her room, scrolling through hateful comments under her photos. "Gold digger," one read. "Fraud," said another. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. She had agreed to this arrangement for survival, not fame. But now the entire world seemed determined to turn her into a villain. When Ethan knocked softly on her door, she quickly wiped her face. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Fine," she lied. He stepped closer, his voice low. "I will fix this." She shook her head. "You cannot fix people's hearts, Ethan. You can only tell them the truth." The next morning, news vans lined the street. Ethan's company stock dipped, and shareholders called for an emergency review. He refused to let anyone else speak for him. That evening, he stood before the press, cameras flashing like lightning. "My marriage," he began, "was a contract. 90 days, no affection, no love. I designed it to protect an image, and in doing so, I hurt the only person who never asked for anything from me. That is the truth." Gasps filled the room. Ava watched the broadcast from the hallway, her hand trembling on the doorframe. Ethan continued, his voice breaking slightly. Miss Reed, Ava gave me her honesty when I could not give her mine. If you want someone to blame, blame me. She owes me nothing." He ended the conference and walked out into the cold night, the cameras still shouting his name. By the time he returned home, the house was quiet. Ava's room was empty, her ring resting on the dresser beside a folded letter. "I signed for money," it read, "but I stayed for love. I am leaving because justice is all I have left." Ethan stood there for a long time, the paper trembling in his hands. Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle and endless. In the following days, he withdrew from public life. The headlines shifted, investors calmed, but the silence in the mansion grew unbearable. Every corner of the house reminded him of her, the echo of her laugh in the kitchen, the trace of her perfume in the hallway. One evening, he stood in the garden where they had once spoken under the fading light. The same lantern flickered beside him, its flame unsteady but alive. "Clause 13, he murmured to the wind. "No falling in love." He gave a small, broken smile. "We both failed." And, for the first time, the failure did not feel like loss, it felt like truth. 3 months passed before the city dared to speak the name Ethan Cole again. The scandal had faded, replaced by new gossip, new faces, new noise. But for Ethan, time did not move forward. It circled the same memory again and again. The night Ava Reed left. The mansion felt hollow now, echoing with his own footsteps. He had dismissed most of the staff, kept only the essentials. His empire ran smoothly without him, but he no longer cared. Each morning, he walked through the empty halls, stopping at the guest room where she used to stay. The ring she left behind still sat in a small glass case on the dresser. Every day, he thought about putting it away. Every day, he could not. Ava, meanwhile, had returned to the life she had before, small, quiet, real. She rented a modest apartment above an art supply store near the river. Her mother was recovering well, smiling more each day. On the surface, things were peaceful. But at night, when the city quieted, Ava still caught herself tracing the faint mark on her finger where the ring had once been. One afternoon, she received a call from a journalist asking for a statement about the Ethan Cole marriage story. She politely declined, then sat by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. "I signed for money. I stayed for love. I left for justice." She whispered the words again, wondering if justice was supposed to hurt this much. At the same time, across town, Ethan attended the groundbreaking ceremony for a new community art center, the same project Ava had proposed during their contract, but never saw completed. It was her idea, her design, her dream. He had named it the Reed Center for Creative Futures. The plaque at the entrance read, "For the one who reminded me that truth has value beyond wealth." Reporters swarmed him afterward, asking if he hoped Ava would see it. He gave a tired smile. "It is not about that. Some promises do not need witnesses." That evening, Ava scrolled through her phone and froze when she saw the headline, "Ethan Cole honors former wife with new foundation." Her heart tightened as she read the article, every quote, every word. She turned off the screen, sat in silence, and realized she had tears on her cheeks. The next day, she took a train across the city. The art center was still under construction, but its glass walls gleamed under the spring Sunday. She walked inside quietly, the smell of fresh paint in the air. Workers moved around her, hanging banners, arranging lights. Then she saw him. Ethan stood near the entrance, talking to an architect. When he turned and saw her, the conversation died mid-sentence. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, two people who had shared everything and nothing all at once. Ava broke the silence first. "You built it." He nodded slowly. "It was yours first." She walked closer, her voice barely steady. "You did not have to put my name on it." "I know," he said. "But I wanted people to remember the woman who changed how I saw the world." The air hung heavy between them. Finally, Ava asked, "Why now?" Ethan's voice softened. "Because you were right. Truth matters. And so does love." She looked at him, searching for anger, for regret, but found only sincerity. "And what if people say this is your apology?" He gave a faint smile. Then let them. I have learned that some apologies are not meant to be believed. They are meant to be lived. Ava's eyes glistened as she took a slow breath. You always did have a way with words. Ethan stepped closer, stopping just a breath away. No, Ava. I had a way with contracts. You had a way with truth. For a moment, neither spoke. The city's hum filled the silence between them, distant yet familiar. Finally, Ava reached into her pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was the letter he had once found beside her ring. Now, rewritten. She placed it in his hand and said softly, Justice does not mean goodbye forever. Sometimes it means finding our way back as equals. Ethan unfolded the letter and read the last line aloud, his voice breaking just slightly. I left for justice, but I came back for peace. Their eyes met again, and this time, neither looked away. Outside the glass walls, sunlight spilled over the city, clear, forgiving, and real. Weeks passed after that first meeting at the Reed Center. Ava began volunteering there quietly, helping with art classes for underprivileged teens. She kept her distance from Ethan, though they often crossed paths in the bright hallways. Every time she saw him, surrounded by children and canvases, she felt a tug of something she had buried long ago, something dangerously close to hope. Ethan respected her space. He would nod politely, share brief words, and disappear into his meetings. Yet at night, when the building emptied, he always found himself standing in front of the mural she had painted, vivid blues and golds, swirling into the outline of two hands, reaching for each other, but never touching. Underneath it, she had written, The distance between us is where truth begins. One afternoon, while Ava was helping set up a student exhibition, a man stormed into the lobby with a microphone and a camera crew. Mr. Cole! He shouted. Is this art center another attempt to repair your image after deceiving investors with a fake marriage? Ethan froze as the cameras turned toward him. Ava stepped forward before he could speak. That marriage was not fake, she said firmly. It began as a contract, yes, but it became something real. If you came here for scandal, you will not find it. You will only find art and second chances. The reporter hesitated, caught off guard by her composure. Ethan's voice joined hers, calm but unshakable. And if you must write a story, he added, write this one. The story of a woman who taught a man that love is the only deal worth signing. The crowd applauded, breaking the tension. The reporters left, and silence returned. Ethan turned to Ava, gratitude soft in his eyes. You did not have to defend me. I was not defending you, she said gently. I was defending the truth. That evening, as the exhibition lights dimmed, Ava found a small envelope on her desk. Inside was an old contract, their marriage agreement now stamped with a single red word across the front, void. Beneath it, a handwritten note read, no more clauses, no more conditions. Just us, if you will have me. Her breath caught. She looked up and saw Ethan standing at the doorway. No suit, no armor, just a man stripped of pride. You do not have to decide now, he said quietly. Ava walked toward him, holding the paper between them. I already have. She tore the contract in half, letting the pieces fall to the floor. Ethan's hand reached for hers, not as a deal, not as a promise, but as something real. For the first time, there were no cameras, no signatures, no lies. Only two people who had finally learned what love meant when everything else was gone. The morning after Ava tore the contract, the sun rose over the lake in soft gold light. For the first time in months, Ethan woke to silence that did not feel empty. He brewed coffee himself and watched the light spread across the city skyline. There was no press, no board meeting, no schedule to control, just stillness. And somewhere in that stillness, he knew she would come back. At the Reed Center, Ava arrived early to prepare for the grand opening. The walls glowed with student paintings, bursts of color and life. She arranged flowers in the lobby, her thoughts drifting to the night before, the look in Ethan's eyes when she tore the paper in half, the weight of his hand closing over hers. She told herself it was enough to start again, this time with no signatures to bind them. As the doors opened today, Guests. Ethan appeared at the entrance, dressed simply in a dark jacket. He did not bring cameras or assistants. He carried only a small box wrapped in ivory ribbon. When Ava saw him, her breath caught, but she kept her composure. "You are early," she said softly. He smiled. "I did not want to miss the first day of what you built." They walked together through the gallery as children and families explored the exhibits. Every wall held a story, every brushstroke a piece of healing. When they reached the center mural, the two hands almost touching, Ethan stopped. "This was where we ended," he said quietly. "Maybe it should be where we begin." He opened the box. Inside was the same ring she had left behind months ago, now restored and engraved with 3 words inside the band: truth, love, justice. Ava looked at him, eyes wide. "Ethan," he took her hand gently, "I once asked you to marry me for a business deal. I am asking you again now, but for life. No contracts, no deadlines, just faith." The crowd around them faded into soft murmurs. She felt tears rise, but this time they were warm. "You do not make this easy," she whispered. "I am not trying to," he said, smiling. "I am trying to make it real." Ava glanced at the ring, then at the faces of the students watching nearby, and finally back at him. "Do you promise to keep Clause 13 broken forever?" Ethan laughed, his voice rough. "Completely void." She nodded once and extended her hand. "Then yes." Applause erupted around them, spontaneous and full of joy. The children cheered, the lights shimmered, and somewhere above them, sunlight broke through the clouds. As Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, he whispered, "This time, it is not about saving a company or clearing a name. It is about keeping a promise to love without conditions." Ava smiled through her tears. "Then let us sign that with our hearts instead." And for the first time, the signature of their story was not written on paper. It was written in the quiet certainty of 2 people who had finally found their way home. 6 months later, the Reed Center had become the beating heart of the city. Every week, its halls filled with laughter, paint-stained hands, and dreams that once seemed too far to reach. Ava Reed, now Ava Cole, walked through the lobby with a clipboard in hand, greeting students by name. She no longer hid behind her past. It had become part of her purpose. In the main gallery, Ethan stood beneath the skylight, speaking with donors about expanding the foundation's outreach. He wore no tie today, just a simple white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. When he saw Ava walking toward him, his expression softened instantly. "You promised to take a break," he said, taking the clipboard from her. "I am taking one," she replied, smiling. "I am walking." He laughed and slipped an arm around her shoulders. "Walking does not count." Across the room, a small crowd gathered around a new installation, a photo wall chronicling the Reed Center's creation. In the middle hung a framed picture from the opening day. Ethan and Ava standing in front of the mural of 2 hands almost touching. Beneath it, a plaque read, "From Contract to Covenant, proof that love written in truth cannot be broken." Ava traced the words with her fingertips. "Do you ever think about how impossible this was?" she asked softly. Ethan looked at her, his voice steady. "Every day, and that is why I will never take it for granted." Outside, the afternoon light turned golden, spilling through the glass windows. The sound of children laughing drifted through the open doors. Ava turned to him, her eyes bright. "We built something good, did we not?" He nodded. "We built something honest. That is better than good." She leaned her head against his shoulder, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat grounding her. For the first time in a long time, everything was simple. No contracts, no conditions. Just 2 people who had broken every rule only to find what was real. Later that evening, as the last students left and the lights dimmed, Ethan walked to the mural once more. He ran his hand over the painted fingertips that never quite touched. "Maybe they do not have to meet," he murmured. "Maybe the space between them is where love lives." Ava joined him, slipping her fingers through his. "Then let us fill that space together," she said. He smiled. "For as long as time allows." As they stood there, hand in hand beneath the fading light, the world outside went on, cars passing, city lights flickering, but inside those walls, their story had already found its peace. And in the quiet glow of the art center, surrounded by color, laughter, and truth, Ethan Cole finally understood what wealth could never buy: the grace of being truly loved and the courage to love in return.